Welcome back to another video to master Spring Boot 3 course. So in our last video we have worked on our entity class, whereas we have seen that whatever field name we have defined with the column name, a table is created for that columns. Now we will complete our entity class. So whenever you create an entity class, you need to create few more things. These are our fields, these are our columns, this will be our table name, and this entity is telling Spring that this will be a table. Now what else we need is, the first thing is we need a constructor. Either you can have a default constructor or you can have a parameterized constructor. In Java we have two constructors. One is default constructor, which is provided by default. Another is parameterized constructor. So here we will create one constructor. There is a shortcut Control N or Command N for Mac. So we'll create a constructor. We'll create constructor for all the fields except the ID field. Then what are we going to do is we will create our toString method. toString method is part of object superclass of Java. So we'll create toString method. Now we will create our getter and setter. Getter and setter method are used to get the value and to set the value. We will select all, we will create our getter and setter. So now if you are familiar with, there are couple of library which help you to reduce the boilerplate code, but we will cover those things in our upcoming videos. And even this functionality is also being catered using Java 11 record feature, but there is a catch over there, so we'll come to that later. Now we have completed our entity class. Now what are we going to do is we will rerun our application and see there isn't any issue. So now everything is working fine. We'll rerun our application. Our application is running as a command line application. This is not a REST API. Now application is start and stop. We will run it. Okay, so there is no impact in our. If you remember, if you have watched my videos, all videos for this series, in starting we discussed right that we have this Spring JPA Hibernate ddl-auto property where we have few values: none, validate, update, create and drop. So we understand that the difference between those four values. Now we'll see one more advanced level thing. People usually don't teach this, but this is what a good software engineer or a bad software engineer. There is no bad software engineer, but a good software engineer or a software engineer. So now what we will do is, first we will change it to none. Okay, we'll change this to none, and then we will come here, and what are we going to do is we will just come here, we will create one more column and we will name it customer underscore address. Now we will come private string address. So what do you think is going to happen once we start our application? We will right click. No, we will not right click here. We will come here. We will right click and we will start our application. Okay, tool is being initialized. Okay, it's just completed. Okay, nothing happened, so we will just come here as well. Okay, so we have 7 columns. Just focus on here. Okay, 7 columns. Now what we will do is that we will change this none to update. We will rerun our application and we will see what will happen. Okay, application shut down. We will run our query. So did you see what happened? Did you notice what happened? Do you know the importance of that property? One more column has been added. That's the update is doing. Update has no impact if there is no change in your code, but if you have done some changes, then there will be a huge impact. See, by mistake a column is added into table. So now do you understand the importance of this thing? Create drop we know, none validate we know. Validate also we will cover more advanced things in upcoming videos, but for none and update, this is the key difference. None and update almost looks like same, and this is advanced level interview question that interview can trick you in this thing. What will happen if you have not worked in an enterprise application, or if you have not watched my video, you don't know that these things work that way. So if you're watching my video till now and if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please subscribe to my channel for amazing content like this. Now you see, right, I have added update. Earlier it was none, I added a column, there is no impact, but once I make it an update, it has updated my database with added a new column in here. So that's the difference between none and update. Whenever we are changing this, make sure whichever company you're working, always whenever you're working with database, and if it is definitely it's a SQL database, MySQL, Oracle, PostgreSQL, Microsoft Server, anything, all you need to make sure that this property is what is this property has been set, and always check with if you're a fresher or if you are beginner, you always should check with your tech lead or senior developer in a company that what value should I use, because definitely whenever you are working, you will never get to work in a new application. You always have to work with an existing application. Maybe you can add just functionality in an existing application. So you always need to maybe on your intern time they might give you a clean slate, but when you are working with enterprise applications, you always have to make sure this property, what is this property value, and because usually what happens is there are a lot of codes has been written and they ask you to reuse those code, and you just go and just reuse some properties and just whenever, or maybe are setting up some SIT environment to UAT environment, and in property has to be different and the database already been set up. Because usually what happens is here we are setting up our database, but what happens is, how to say, that environment which are not, you don't even have access to those environment, you can't access the database, you can only get the details and you just set up it, and when you deploy your code, then only your code can access that thing. So you always need to make sure that what is this property and what actually we need to set this property for your testing environment, your SIT environment, or your production environment, or your staging environment. Make sure, I have seen people do mistake and then we have to fix those mistakes, correct those mistakes. So I'm just emphasizing on this thing that you should never ever blindly follow anything, because this is very crucial. This video is only about these two things. We will cover so many things. I have so many things in pipeline. So before that, before we wrap up, we just add one more thing here, that in our next video we will just jump into inserting, because right now we have inserted record using SQL, but we haven't inserted record from our code, because right now we are not using REST API. So what are we going to do is we'll create one bean. Okay, we'll create one bean, and then in this bean, what are we going to do? We will define a public command line runner. So command line runner is nothing, just like you are running your code in command line. So if you remember, right, if you have just created a normal Java project like Java class, and then we have PSVM, right, public static void main, and that public static void main, that is main method, is the entry point for Java, and then in that main method you have just added whatever you want to do. I mean 2 + 2 = 4, anything you could do, right? So same thing applicable here, because this is we are using a Spring framework. So Spring framework allow us to command line runner to run our application in that way. So you don't need a REST API to always call your information. So when we are going to cover Spring Batch, right, it will make a lot more sense. Right now I know it might be going out of your head, but it will make a lot more sense when are we going to Spring Batch. So subscribe to my channel if you haven't subscribed it. Okay, perfect. So if you haven't, just create this bean. So what are we going to do is we will create our method here. Okay, and we can just simply create method now, but I don't want to take more time on this thing because this is quite small. We'll just rerun it, see whether it is printing or not. So code should not break. Okay, it is printing. Perfect. So now we understand the difference between update and none. We completed our entity class. So now in upcoming videos, subscribe to watch more. Thank you.